Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to Tabadlab's 54th Policy Roundtable, where we discuss future of work for women in Pakistan. My name is Hiba Fatma, and I'm the Senior Associate for Tabadlab's Center for Digital Transformation. The topic that we are to discuss today is as critical for the country as it is personal for me and for more than half of the population of this country, for whose lived realities are constantly defined by the challenges and the opportunities that we're going to be discussing today. Before we delve deeper into the discussion, I really want to sort of unpack what future of work means for the purposes of this discussion, and for sort of having a clearer idea of what we mean when we say we want to have a more inclusive and equitable future of work for women. Future of work essentially refers to the way businesses, organizations, governments, entities in general are expected to change over the course of time as they increasingly adopt digital technologies that sort of impact organization and the work that they do in broadly three aspects, which is the what, the how, and the where. In terms of the what, increasingly digitalization has made some jobs more obsolete and has in the process also brought about new opportunities and formed new job opportunities for people in various sectors. So it's the kind of work and the nature of work that has changed as a result of the digitalization journey that countries, organizations, and people every day in their lives have been going through. The change in nature of work also sort of impacts who carries out this work, right? So for a lot of the new jobs that are coming out, a lot of the work is being carried out by AI, by any kind of technology that has been brought into place. But at the same time, you're creating newer job opportunities for people to manage those technologies and to manage the kind of new avenues that open up. So the idea of who carries out the new jobs and the new opportunities that are created is also constantly changing. With that, there is change in terms of where this work gets done. So previously, within legacy sort of idea of what work is, we had our office building, and you would come to work every single day and you would do your work within that enclosed space, and you would leave, and that is where your workplace would be defined as. Currently, many of us have experienced being able to work right after getting up from our beds, or going to cafes and working, going to a friend's house and working, essentially and virtually any given place on this planet that allows you to connect to your workplace virtually and remotely is your new workplace. So the idea of work is being constantly shifted because of how organizations and businesses are adopting technology. And as I elaborate on this further, you're probably thinking, and you're thinking right, Pakistan is also going through all of these changes. In our daily lives, I know I have sort of seen how the work environment, especially after COVID, has dramatically shifted for a lot of people. However, for Pakistan, this change is also happening within the broader context of its economic situation, which sadly is currently weak. As most of us know, we have been going through some economic difficulties and economic recession, and from a 30,000-foot view, our economic structures stand quite weak right now, where our manufacturing industry is still not the most developed. We're still more dependent on our primary and secondary industry compared to our tertiary industries. You have a weak regulatory regime. But most important and most critical of all, you have a very low rate of female labor force participation. A recent report by the World Bank points out that 21% of the women who can work, who are of that age, only 21% are actually employed in the workforce. In this entire backdrop, right, if you as an organization and as a country are going through this future of work evolution and are transitioning into that, technology can can act as a factor that levels the playing field, and it is the pivotal factor driving future of work, but it is also an enabler and has that potential where we can, if leveraged correctly, properly, and optimized in the best way possible, can um, create more opportunities for women, can level the playing field. It can future-proof women and make the transition from jobs that are becoming obsolete towards jobs that are being newly created and are more productive and offer a greater sort of comfort to women. However, this again is a double-edged sword. So for women, future of work in the backdrop of Pakistan's current socio-economic circumstances is not as easy as it seems, because you're currently experiencing that change within how organizations are developing, while sort of trying to fight your way through legacy systems of economic structures, while also navigating the risk opportunities that future of work and such changing circumstances bring. So for women, it doesn't get easier as we move on and we try and see how things are changing for us. And this is something that we want to unpack and further delve deeper into. We want to understand what are some of the challenges that digitalization and future of work can offer to women, but at the same time, what are some of the opportunities and how do both of these link together, and how can women as a whole and the country at a broader level can work around some of these nuances to see how we make future of work for women more inclusive, more equitable, and at the same time more productive. Without getting into the topic a lot more, let me please introduce our amazing panel, which is an all-women's panel. I'm grateful that we're joined today by Dr. Hadia Majid, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Economics at LUMS and is also the director for GenTech Initiative, which focuses on women's interaction with technology. Dr. Majid's research recently has also focused on women's access and participation in the labor force and the market, and how digital technologies affect that. And we'll be drawing a lot from her research and experience in today's discussion. And we're excited to see what she has to say from a very technical perspective. We are also joined by Hira Zainab, who is an industry leader on digital transformation and innovations. Hira was also the Secretary General at Pakistan Software Houses Association, PASHA, where she led critical projects to empower and unleash the potential of IT and ITS industry within Pakistan. And as a woman working and leading some of the critical projects that the critical IT projects that country has seen, we're excited to hear what Hira has to say about women within the tech sector in Pakistan. We're also excited to have Zofeen Ibrahim on the panel with us. Zofeen is an independent freelance journalist based in Karachi. A lot of Zofeen's work has actually been a window into people's, especially women's lived realities and the complexities that digital solutions bring around it, and kind of how we can bring a more human-centered perspective to becoming digitalized. And we'll be, again, depending a lot on Zofeen to constantly stop us where we try and get more technical to bring us back, bring that human perspective to this entire discussion. Last but definitely not the least, we're also joined by Faiza Yusuf, who is a software engineer with over 13 years of experience in building products and teams. Faiza has also founded many initiatives that focus on empowering women and focus on improving gender parity within the tech sector. But most importantly, a lot of her work has been focused on skilling women so that they're able to participate more efficiently and effectively within the tech industry. And as glad and proud as I am and my team is to have an all-women's panel, because you really get to see this in Pakistan on any topic, and especially a topic that has previously been understood to be very male-dominated. The tech industry, as we all know, has, constantly we've walked into rooms where it's usually a sea of men talking about issues that women face. So as excited as I am to be on a panel that is sort of led by women, I do want to take a step back and see where women in Pakistan are. We see that female labor force participation, as I mentioned earlier, is abysmal and is not even close to being matched by what our peers in other countries are going through. A recent report by the World Bank pointed out an opportunity cost of $80 billion that Pakistan is sort of missing out on because we have a low female labor force participation rate. And again, this is not only just a business imperative or a feel-good sort of a subject that we bring to this discussion, right? As I mentioned, this is critical for the country's progress. This is critical for women's progress. This is critical for society's progress at large. Within this backdrop, Dr. Hadia, how do we see women's labor, sort of the shift in trends in women's labor force participation as value chains, sort of digitize more and globally as well as locally? How do you think has that shifted females' labor force participation specifically within Pakistan? And it'd be great to also have insights from you in terms of what are the underlying reasons for low female labor force participation in digitally driven economies, sectors within Pakistan. Over to you.
Thank you, Eba, and thank you to Tabadlab for organizing this fantastic session. Great to see all the panelists here, and great to be part of this panel, which is all women. So you're right to say that we have such a high opportunity cost of women not working. It's absolutely true. Having such few women, and I do want us to take a pause here. It is the formal labor force participation rate, which is so low. It is amongst the lowest in the region. It is not in sync with what we see in other countries at similar levels of development. So what we see in Pakistan is in the formal space, so we're thinking of offices, or we're thinking of areas which are covered well by the economy, which are served well by the economy, you don't see a lot of women working there. What you do see women, the type of work that women do tend to do tends to be more informal in nature. Women do tend to work out of the home. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that women in Pakistan face a very high reproductive burden. So women in Pakistan, according to the Pakistan Time Use Survey, have nearly 10 times as much reproductive burden as compared to men. So on the one hand, women have to take care of this reproductive burden, and secondly, as we know, it's a conservative space. Women are not really welcome in the public sphere. They face a lot of hostility when they step out. So they face a lot of mobility restrictions. So when you take both of these, working out of the home has tended to be, if women want to work, they find it much more comfortable to work out of the home. They find it easier to work out of the home. Now, what's been exciting in the last few years is that with the rise in digitization, with the rise in internet usage, with the rise in mobile usage, you're seeing women able to work out of their home that much more easier. Isme, the caveat is that women's internet use and women's use of mobile devices, it's monitored, it's not free. So if women are working out of the home, and if they're working in they're using all of this technology, these digital platforms to get work, to expand the earning opportunities, that's not freely available to them either. So both in the public space, in the formal space, you're seeing women not being present because of a multitude of factors. And I'm sure Zofine is going to talk about public transport in this context as well. And then within this home space where they are working, they're not able to work there freely as well. And I do want to bring in your point about value chains. I mean, the World Bank report that you refer to, one of the things that's highlighted again and again in that World Bank report is that Pakistan is losing out because of where we are placed in the value chain. So, chahe aap hamara koi sa bhi sector le lein. Within that sector, even the sectors where we are exporting, we are much lower down in the value chain, and we're exporting products which aren't as highly priced, which means that the types of earnings that we are doing are not as well. And I know we'll go on to some of these points later on as well. One of the reasons why we are so low down in the value chain is because the kind of labor productivity that we have is much lower. And women particularly don't have the kind of labor productivity. So to sum up, women are not working. When they are working, they're working in the types of sectors jahan pe they're not able to achieve that level of productivity, both because of the constraints that they face in terms of the type of complementary services that they have available. आप चाहे internet ले लें, आप credit market ले लें, आप capital market ले लें. And then secondly, one of the reasons why they're not able to see that high level of productivity is because of the type of imbued labor that they have, the type of skills that they have. So they don't even have that great an opportunity to engage in trainings. Now, this is all gradually changing, and I'm hoping we talk about some of those positives in this space as well. We are seeing digital trainings taking place. both across low income women, middle income women, high income women. We're seeing this, and I think part of it has to do with that there is this growing understanding within the population, चाहे वो मर्द हो, चाहे वो औरतें हों, that we really need to get our women into these higher value chains, these ability, and we really need to grow their ability to increase their earnings. I stop here.
uh, value chains and where we are placed within those value chains, because that is something that I wanted to come to next. And thank you for pointing it out early on within the conversation. As you mentioned, it's very critical to see where women and then where Pakistan is placed within these global value chains. And one thing that we have talked about a lot within the discourse is how we need to move on from low sort of value added services to high value added services for this entire process of future of work to actually mean something. With that being said on one side, another sort of trend that we see is that women are limited to very specific occupations and very specific industries, and those industries are understood to be very gendered in nature. और जाहिर सी बात है वो फिर मर्दों की जिन इंडस्ट्रीज के अंदर ज़्यादा शमालियत होती है उससे कम पे ही आती हैं, and that's always has been the case. Here, I want to know what your opinion on the disruptions being caused within the tech industry by women are. There was a recent report that was released by Pasha, where it was indicated that there are only that are out of the tech industry, only 14% of the tech industry is sort of inhibited by women. The rest of it are all men, which also speaks volumes about the kind of digital products then come out. These are supposed to be products that are sort of equal for all segments within the society and community, but that can't be possible if you're eliminating one segment from there. It would be interesting to know your perspective, in addition to Dr. Hadia's comments about how this is placed on a lower value chain. Have women been able to sort of penetrate that sector, make a mark there? And if not, what have been the restrictions uh, to more specific to the tech industry? We understand the general limitations for the labor force participation, but what is it specifically for the tech industry that has been a constraint?
Thank you, Hiba. So I think before I come to what particularly in the digital space and in the tech industry women have been facing the challenges, let's take a step back. And when we talk particularly about the current status we are in, according to Global Gender Gap Report published by World Economic Forum, Pakistan is not just one of the lowest ranking countries. Out of 146 countries, Pakistan ranks on 145th number. We are only ahead of Afghanistan. That's the situation we are in. Now we can go in a debate of whether a lot of the women participation is currently not being documented for Pakistan, but still we have to realize that the situation that we are in is actually needs not just awareness but also it's an emergency state, and we need to take measures addressing this emergency of lack of women participation in the workforce. Now, in the tech industry, this dilemma goes to next level. And the problem is not just in the low participation. The problem is also in lack of data of women participation. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we need to address. So in Pasha, when I was when I took over as a Secretary General Pasha, one of the first things that we did was to document, and have an idea of the problem that we are facing, because only then we can actually do the advocacy in front of government for the initiatives. And it's that moment when we found that only 16% of the current workforce in the tech industry, in the IT industry, which is the fastest growing industry in Pakistan, which is the most feasible industry for all the remote workers and all for the women, it only had 16% participation. So we did a lot of data analysis, and we published a benchmarking analysis. I'm hoping to talk more about that later in the conversation, to look at all the reasons of which companies had higher diversity ratio and which companies had low diversity ratios, because we found that more than 80% companies actually have low diversity ratio. And we looked at what those companies are doing different that is causing um, either the diversity ratio to drop or increase. And we have to know all those policies, be in HR or in the regulatory side, which actually encourage women participation in the workforce. But more importantly, I want to pinpoint that while Pasha's report only talks about the formal economy, which is the IT industry in terms of IT companies, we also have to take a step back and see that women currently are contributing to digital economy in three main areas. One, as professionals, which the number is 16%, but we still have we have come a long way. The second is women freelancers, and that number has actually exponentially increased in the last couple of years, specifically since COVID. And I'm sure Faiza is also going to talk more about that. And the third is women entrepreneurs. We see a huge rise in the women entrepreneurs coming now, coming to the market. Just talking about quoting Ignite in the process, which is the startup ecosystem for under Ministry of IT. 46% of their startups are led by women entrepreneurs. So we see an increase in women participation in those areas. But in the formal economy, where the future of work is headed, we still need to take a lot of measures to make those, the environment enabling and make and fulfill all the criteria for the future to be bright for women.
On the ending note of your reply, and we really need to work more towards making sure that this is an inclusive space and that the future of work is inclusive of women and is equitable for women. As you and Dr. Hadia both mentioned, that there is a lot of informal economy that we also need to sort of take in account and consider how that has been impacted by digitalization and by adoption of technology. And we hear a lot of positives and a lot of opportunities, especially within that area. We've heard of women who work in remote areas are now being able to have greater access to market because they're connected through WhatsApp, through Instagram, or through any of these social platforms available. So in that sense, those distances are then being bridged through digital technologies. And that has really been one of the more positive cases to have come out of a post-COVID era-led digital transformation for Pakistan that thankfully was catalyzed due to some unfortunate events, but nonetheless, we're sort of reaping the dividends of that. Zofine, would you help us sort of understand from a more human-centered perspective to the entire conversation that we're having? I mean, we heard from the academic and we've heard from the policy person. We would love to hear now from the journalist about the actual realities of how women have been able to better leverage digital technologies and digital solutions for increased labor or more productive labor force participation. So my focus now I would want the conversation to shift a little from talking about what that work is and who does that work to the modality of work, right? So we've seen that being changed, as Hira mentioned. There are a lot of freelancers who are working from the comfort of their homes, and that has allowed a lot more women to participate in the industry. Could you talk to us a little about what that entire change has looked like for women across different areas of Pakistan? And can that space and is that space safe for women? Because you also understand there are a lot of safety issues related to being present online, and women's online presence has raised a lot of red flags, and there are a lot of social issues. So could we know a bit more about how going forward that entire modality of work can be made more inclusive while remaining a viable option for women?
Thank you, Hiba. I think that Dr. Hadia and Hera have really opened up this conversation very well for me to now get in. I'm a journalist. I have talked to people who are in the or women who have joined the workforce, be it the digital sector, or be it the IT, or be it the regular work. The problems that women face are more or less the same, surprisingly, whether they are in the virtual world or whether they are in the real world. there is a lot of restriction on, as I think Dr. Hadia mentioned, that there's a lot of restriction on women using technology. There is a lot of, and apart from the families, actually, there's a lot of suspicion. They do not have access to the internet always, and just the fact that who they are talking to, what they are doing on the internet. So there's a lot of surveillance for them in the home front. So that is one thing I feel that I noticed that I had interviewed a woman, a young woman who was a teacher, and she then decided that she wanted to, go into the IT sector, and she did it. Her mother supported. Her mother was the only one who supported her. She didn't have a father, but the older brother, who didn't even live with her, he didn't want her to step. He allowed her to work in a school, but he didn't allow her to take up a course. Um, and so she hid it. So she didn't tell him. And then after that, she found work and she couldn't tell him then also. And so they kept hiding till she got her first pay. And then it became all right. So I think that I feel that wages also matter. So we should not overlook that. And what else I can tell you that, women have to, and we found that women did a lot of, women who were working found after the pandemic and during the pandemic that flexi work mode worked best for them. And these I'm talking about the more women in the banking sector, in the corporate sector. And we can talk about it later. I can talk to you now about it. That how, the work life balance also matters to them, and how it changed. And they now they realize that they don't have to be so you know uh, so harassed now. It's easier for them to maintain that balance. I'll stop here.
Zofine, I'll definitely be taking you up on the offer of talking about this in a bit more detail as the conversation progresses, because this is something I really want us to look deeper into, because I feel like this is that one opportunity that we can really leverage for the betterment and sort of make sure that we don't lose sight of what digitalization can offer as we discuss its challenges. There's, however, something very interesting that has been coming out of all of the three speakers currently. And it has made me realize that all of the conversation we're having is manifestation of something else that is a root cause and is at the back end. So females' labor force participation and contribution is essentially a manifestation of the opportunities and preferences and choices that they were allowed to make. So I want to take that step back and sort of analyze what that entire layer looks like and what that universe has contributed towards female opting for jobs that are based on digitalization, or opting to even access labor force participation at all. Faisa, given your experience of working very closely with women and sort of skilling them for future-facing frontier jobs, could you talk to us a little about what perhaps are some constraints or some choices that they have to make at more foundational levels? So, for instance, while they're being schooled, or not schooled at all for that matter, or while they're in universities and in colleges, what are some of those choices or preconceived notions that these women carry with themselves that then manifest in how they understand the job market around them and they understand the value of their work? And secondly, as you respond to this question, how come women, there's this perception कि खवातीन आती नहीं है STEM में. To me, that does not logically add up. There's nothing that's preventing them from coming, right? So there has to be some sort of social barrier, either conscious or subconscious, that's preventing them from going there. So in your experience, could you talk to us about what those limitations have looked like for women? And then once they overcome that, or consciously overcome that, when they realize the importance of being digitally literate and digitally proficient, what does that change bring for them in their personal lives? And how do the employers react to people to women especially, who don't perhaps have degrees in these because of the choices and constraints that they had, but now have been upskilled. Is there any sort of disparity in how the employer treats these two kind of labor forces?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Somehow construction started on the upper unit, so you may hear some disturbance. When it comes to constraints for women, when we talk about education, we do know that women do go less to schools and colleges. We also know that women tend to get married early, so that's why their access to education is limited. I graduated from a public university, and in my batch there were 50 men and 50 women, so a pretty gender balanced class. I mean, completely gender balanced class. But when you look at private universities and more expensive universities, you will see that the number of women that are in engineering are comparatively less than men. The reason being that a lot of times parents do not want to invest in that kind of education for their girls because they don't see any return out of it. The important issue is with stereotyping, and we know that stereotypes are self-fulfilling. So when we keep on telling people that they can't do something or they're not made for something, then that things become like a self fulfilling prophecy. Women also are marginalized when they go to universities, because a lot of times universities and in some cases also people around them tend to tell them that they are here because they are hunting for a good rishta rather than looking for a career, and they should focus on that instead of looking for a job. When it comes to the change that we see when we train women on coding, so at Code Girls we do take women from non-traditional backgrounds, so high school graduates, women who have done a bachelor's in arts or a bachelor's in commerce, or sometimes they just have done a high school degree. When they learn how to code, you see the difference in the self confidence that they have. And when they get employed, so a lot of women that I work with are from lower middle class families, so the household income is less than 40,000 rupees a month. And when they get employed in tech, so tech is a good paying industry, so the first job is around 40-50,000 rupees per month for them, so that changes the whole dynamic of the family. And you will see that they are more confident, they are heard more in the families, as Zulfishin mentioned that when the salary came, things changed. So that is something that we have repeatedly seen, that when the money starts to trickle in the family, people become okay with this idea of women working. um, in tech sector, when these girls go to work in the companies, they are basically treated differently, but at the same time judged in a similar way. So this is something repeatedly that I've spoken to software companies, that when you're hiring bootcamp graduates, please do not take a basic engineering test from them, because they do not know anything about engineering. These are the people who have learned how to code only, so they do not have a lot of background engineering knowledge that usually people like me or people who have an engineering degree have. So yeah, they are judged harshly, but at the same time, you see them. And also because a lot of companies still have a restriction in terms of having a graduate or having an engineering graduate, these women also find issues when it comes to promotions and when it comes to going to the next step in their career. So this is something that is there. Having said that, um, there is a huge issue with discriminating against women, especially women who also want to have a family. So when you go to a software company and you tell them that you're about to get married or you're planning to get married in a couple of years, this thing goes against you, because in their minds, you can either be a good spouse or a good mother or a good professional. You can't be all the things at the same time. So they would rather have you sit at home and do nothing than to hire you and give you ample support to do a good job. So this is something that we have all repeatedly seen at Women in Tech PK. We collect a lot of data in terms of what is happening in the tech sector. And what we usually see is that women tend to leave their careers in tech after 3 to 5 years of working in tech. This is the time when most of them get married and decide to have families. And because a lot of companies do not provide support and they do not understand that that's how the universe works, they tend to marginalize women and they tend to discriminate against women who want to have a family, and then from there they tend to leave their jobs. So I think I'll stop here.
I think the construction work happening in the background does sort of solidify what we've been talking about, how it becomes very difficult even with digitalization to make sure that we're leveraging technologies and we have an enabling support system around us. Faiza, you mentioned something very interesting and very pertinent, which is that women may be able to access those jobs and have, therefore made their way and are through the door, but their progress then gets stifled, and the chain of that progression is not what it has been for men, and that we see is a lot more the case in tech-based industries, and because a lot of the times the idea is you need to be a lot more digitally proficient to be able to operate on those level and in those fields. Dr. Hadi, you spoke a lot about what prevents women from accessing these space and accessing the labor force. I wanted to shift the conversation a little to sort of understand, in terms of progression, what are some of the supply and demand factors that will affect women's readiness for a more digitally enabled economic sector? And how can we be able to bridge some of those gaps going forward and deciding that this is going to be a more digitally oriented workplace for women? Those factors, are they more to do with skilling? Are they more to do with the kind of infrastructure that the employer provides you? And can those enabling factors also come through the societal and governmental efforts into this entire trajectory?
So Hiba, I would say हमें सब कुछ की जरूरत है. So we need
Sorry, I think
we need enabling. All of the panelists here talk about.
Sorry, Dr. Hadi, we lost you for a brief minute. We'll have you back.
Okay, all right. I was just saying that we need enabling at all levels. जो आपने जिक्र किया है. So we need enabling at the household level, at the institutional level, at the macro level, and it's been really great listening to all of the conversation that the panelists have been doing. Because it's really unpacking all of the constraints that women face, but I think it's also really important to think about the opportunities that are available. So I do want to say, I think your questions about the STEM, the women in STEM is it's so interesting, because when you talk to parents and when you talk to even people who are enrolled in universities or schools, inevitably they will always point to women in the class and say that these are the most hardworking and they are the ones who tend to do the best. So everyone recognizes the potential that women have, but then what really holds the women in our society back in a way is what happens after you graduate, the kind of pressures that you have. And usme, it's like I was saying earlier, it's a lot of times it ends up being the reproductive pressures. Now, I think digitization really offers a fantastic opportunity if, as you've been saying, we leverage it right, because it really is, it can, if we wanted to, become a mechanism for women to be able to sort of balance all of these pressures simultaneously. अगर आप उनको सही किस्म की ट्रेनिंग प्रोवाइड कर दें, सही किस्म की रिसोर्सेज प्रोवाइड कर दें, like you were saying when you were giving the preamble to this panel, women can really work from anywhere. And I don't see why they can't work in a whole host of industries. So I think the whole space of women doctors working from home, that's been leveraged really well. कि जो आपकी women doctors who don't end up practicing, वो घर बैठे अपने practice कर सकती हैं, and they can then meet that shortfall when it comes to the supply of doctors in your remote areas. Similarly, जो edtech industry है, I think it's been leveraged really well post-COVID. During COVID, it started, and you saw all of these tech solutions, educational tech solutions come up, and I think these have now been extended post-COVID as well. You see a host of digital platforms coming up, making it possible for your demand for these products being met by the suppliers of these products. Many, and much of this is happening from the comfort of people's homes. What we have to be careful in when it comes to digitization and automation is this caveat that there are some occupations that are more conducive to digitization, And this is why in the first question I was talking about the informal sector and problems there. So while at the same time we're hearing all of these anecdotes in my own work in our own work at Gentech, we've come across so many women who have pivoted their small businesses and sort of used those to come to sort of overcome issues of harassment that they may be facing at their physical workspace. So they've pivoted earning opportunities to operate out within the home and sort of bypassed harassment at work and en route to work. But the problem with this is it goes back to where are these occupations in the value chain. So हाँ earning opportunities provide तो कर रहे हैं इन खवातीन को, लेकिन जब तक वो skills के साथ meet नहीं हो रही हैं, जब तक उनको सही तरह से leverage नहीं किया जा रहा कि वो एक extended it रहेगा. And as good as it is that we'll be seeing women enter the labor force, our labor force, we see women earning, we're not going to see that high levels of earning that you need in order to really have that impact at the household level, in order to really see that changes in decision making within the household, changes in women's status, see them make those decisions for themselves and for for their children, which would really start changing the landscape of Pakistan and take us up in those WEF Global Gender Gap Report rankings.
I appreciate the complete honesty of that response in saying that we are going to have to inevitably work across all of these layers and fix everything for us to actually be making headway into the situation. And I think as realistic as that is, we also need to work more on the strategies that come to it. And I would like the conversation to shift to that. But before that, I believe Zofine has something to add on women and STEM education. And I think this is where we get a bit more of a diversified answer. So on to you, Zofine.
So I just wanted to say that, Hiba, that we need role models in STEM even. And we also need more professional women to take up leadership roles. Only then, when we create a critical mass, then only we can, fight for women can, when they lead, they can fight for their rights, fight for support of childcare, end or at least come to par with the gender wage gap, then promote reproductive rights, offer protection from violence. वो सब तभी होगा when there is like some role models for us. I don't know if you know, but like I think British Council last year, this year only, I don't know how many people know that British Council is offering scholarships for higher education to, I think, 21 universities in the UK for women, 100 scholarships, of which I think 41, last year they gave 41 to South Asian women. So ये सब देखने का है. Then there is another university, I forget the name, where there is a scholarship for Akila Islam. I didn't even know she was a physicist. इस साल से they are trying to have a fellowship on her name. She was a Pakistani. So इस तरह की चीजें हैं, but we don't know about these things. I think as a media person, I feel that I am not promoting this enough. This news just gets waylaid somewhere. So I think there needs to be leadership, women leadership, and they need to be more visible, and we need to do something about that. Thank you.
I completely agree with that, and I don't think this gets enough sort of talking time in conversations that we have about how important it is to have women role models be presented and be talked about in situations like these, so that for the rest of the women, and even for women like us who are obviously a lot more privileged and have a lot more access to all of these areas of knowledge and people who we can look up to, it still feels like we're fighting our own battles, and this feels like a very siloed space unless we're on a panel like this where you're constantly surrounded by women who have made their way through this industry and have shown that there is nothing that women can't do. As you rightly pointed out, there's definitely a need to have more of a peer-to-peer effect of the impact women can make within the tech sector and the tech industry. And I believe, Faiza, you have been doing some work in some capacity to bring women together who work within the tech sector, to offer them a platform uh, where they can all talk about their challenges, but also be a source of inspiration to all the other women. Um, Based on what Zophine's identified as, something that's very critical, a very critical element of actually getting women into the workforce, could you tell us what impact having such a platform has had on, say, the second and third order of sort of opportunity identification by women, and how has that really formed a network of all of these women who inspire one another?
Right. Thank you, Hiba. So, Women in Tech PK, the idea was that what Sophie mentioned, we wanted to connect women, aspiring women in tech with role models, women who were in. I was teaching at FAST Karachi at that time as a visiting professor, and I basically created it for my students. And now it's been 6 years, and we have exploded. We have over 10,000 members, all women who are working in tech, mostly in Pakistan. 90% of them are in Pakistan. A community like this is important because you see that women do tend to have a lot of questions when it comes to workplace safety, when it comes to career opportunities, when it comes to a lot when it comes to finding the right kind of support in their environment. And the community basically gives them access to do that. So women can come and ask questions and connect with each other. We also do a lot of programs around building women's footprint, digital footprint. So we do a lot of interviews, we publish a lot of lists, we give them space to guest post, talk about their experiences. There are a lot of webinar series on education and skill building that we do for opportunities both locally and internationally. So again, another thing that we do is to make sure that when there is a panel, we call it out and we give them access to women speakers. So if there's a conference that they're looking for women speakers, they can go to prowomen.pk that Pasha made in collaboration with Code Girls, the organization that I run. But at the same time, they can also reach out in terms of finding women to be in audience at the conferences. Women do need these because I started working in career. I had no idea where to go, who to look for when it comes to advice. And what we see is that women tend to find a lot of peers to work with or to learn together. This is something that I've seen over and over again, that the platform gives them access to fellow women that they can work together and learn together. So that's again, that's something that is needed. Another thing that we do to make sure that these women are able to get the right opportunities is to basically reach out to organizations and ask them if they have any openings, if especially openings that are either remote or that they provide flexible work hours, so that we can basically push them in the community and women can apply to those communities. I am a program chair for a bunch of international conferences. So another thing that I do in the capacity and bring a lot of other people to do for these women is to basically give them mentoring and coaching to send their proposals or talk papers to international conferences where they can participate. So again, there are a lot of ways in which we are trying to kind of help women push from one step to the next. At the same time, one community or one space is not enough because we only have 10,000 women. Seems like a big number, but there are way too many women in Pakistan. There are a lot of women who do not know anything about tech, and we need to bring them to that fold also. We're trying to do that via Code Girls, again, bringing non-tech women or women from non-traditional backgrounds to tech. But at the same time, it's a small program. Code Girls is a very, very small program. We need these things on national level to kind of help women get into it. Um, Another thing that I would like to mention is to basically this idea that the work that women do is not serious work, is not a career. This is a repeated narrative that I've heard from people around me, as well as when I look at the conversations happening in the community, that people think that women's career is something that they're doing because they have time or because they don't have anything to do right now, but they do not consider it as something as serious as a man's career. and that kind of harms a lot of women, in the sense that if they are very ambitious, they are called out, they find issues in their personal and professional lives, and at the same time a lot of them internalize this idea that career is just for me, just something that I'm doing. Job is something that I'm doing because I have time. I do not have children, or I'm not married, or I have free time, and otherwise this is not something that I'm required to do or that I must do. So taking this seriously, taking your career, your education seriously, is something that comes from, a lot of times comes from the people around you, from your household, from the people that you choose to be friends with. So we this is another thing that we all need to think about, in terms of how do we frame women, who are career oriented, or who want to build an empire for themselves. So this is really important, that shifting the narrative towards not considering them, like generally I do not watch TV, but I've heard that in a lot of dramas, if they want to show you a villain, they show you a woman who works in an office. So again, we need to change that narrative and tell them that women, all types, looking in different ways, covering themselves, not covering themselves, coming from an urban city, from a rural area, everybody can work in that. One good thing that I want to share is about, as Hira mentioned, women freelancers. So interestingly, in Pakistan, women freelancers make more money than men. So I was looking at some data for a recent presentation that I had to give on Pakistan's digital landscape, and I saw that women in Pakistan make 10% more money than their male counterparts. So if a man is making $20 an hour, the woman is making $22 an hour. And we also see that women are more in numbers when it comes to the freelancing landscape than men. Women are more successful on Upwork than men. Women are more successful on Fiverr than men. So, which is again a good news that I thought that I would like to share with you all.
Happy to hear of all the positives. And again, this has been quite an enlightening discussion, at least for me, just knowing about all of the initiatives that have been going around and the opportunities that have already been leveraged in many ways and the opportunities that we're yet to leverage. I also want to discuss what concrete steps can be taken to sort of address some of the problems that we today have identified. I know there's a risk of falling into the trap of admiring the problem in panel conversations like the one that we're currently in. So I don't want that. I don't want this discussion to end on a note where we just unpack the problem and leave it there. I want us to go to the next step and see what are the action items. Hira, if you could help us sort of realize and identify what are some of the action items that, and some of the strategies that stakeholders ranging from employers to the government can undertake for making sure that this, as we go ahead, future of work for women remains an inclusive sort of an agenda. We'd be happy to sort of draw from your insights on working as a ICT reforms expert within different sectors. What has this looked for you? And you mentioned earlier about some of the HR strategies that you have been dissecting at your time in Pasha. It'd be interesting to know what are some of the key elements for this strategy that you feel would be beneficial for women going forward.
Thank you, Hema. Before I go towards the solutions, I think let's take a step back. And I was listening to some of the conversation that was happening earlier. Specifically, when we talk about employment and workforce, it's extremely important to realize of the reality that we are living in. Out of 25,000 graduates that come out in the industry, IT graduates, only 5 to 10% are employable. So only 2,500 to 5,000 are employed by the industry, and the rest of them are unemployed because of lack of desired skills, lack of adequate skills which the industry needs. So there's a huge challenge of lack of skilled resources that the IT industry faces currently, because the lack of alignment between academia and industry. Now, in Pasha, we did this survey and we asked 140 companies about their available job openings, and we found that only 140 companies had 20,000 job openings. And knowing that the actual industry consists of more than 10,000 to 15,000 companies, we actually speculate roughly 100,000 current job openings available in market, which are not currently being given or employed because of lack of skills. And that's where the importance of skill development programs, skilling, reskilling, and upskilling comes in. And the reason why I'm bringing up this topic is because of two reasons. One, in case of women, while upskilling, reskilling is important, there's also a huge dilemma that we are facing, is that a lot of women take career breaks or do not go to the industry right after their education, or as Faiza pointed out, when they get married, they take a career break after 3 to 5 years. So when they have to go back to the industry, they need returnship programs, which some of the programs have already been initiated, but there still needs to be more understanding of the skills that are needed by the industry and addressing that particular market of women who were part of the industry at one point, and then they had to leave it at later. And second, that we were, I was in discussion with Sri Lankans the other day, and when we look at the World Economic Forum Global Gender Report, only two countries showed improvement in their indicators, specifically in the indicator of women in leadership, and Sri Lanka is one of them. So I was very curious to find out that what steps did Sri Lanka take, which actually resulted in the increase in an improvement in the indicators. And the interesting response that I got was that the thing that they worked on was on the higher education, phase, and they worked on women participation and gender ratio in the education side. And the reason why it was amusing was because we are no strangers to this response. The actual root cause goes back to our K to 12 education, goes to our 12th grade, our FSC grade, our university thing. Currently, I was in the engineering program. Faiza was telling about that she had 50% gender ratio in her classroom. In my case, I was in the engineering program, and there was a batch of 250, 300 students, and only 10 were females, and I was one of the 10, 15 females. So the women ratio in the university level, in the IT and in the science programs, is low, which actually then contributes to lower ratio in the job market, and then eventually contributes to the leadership and management positions as well. And when we talk about barriers, where I see barriers on a broader level in two categories. One category is the access, and those are the barriers which are similar for males as well as for females. That barrier includes, lack of infrastructure, which currently, even for digital workspace, it only requires a device and internet connectivity. So as long as you have a device and a stable internet connection, you can be a contributing factor for the economy. But the second bigger barrier is the social barrier, where the biasness comes in, where where even the access barrier, which is similar for males and females, becomes more challenging because of lesser screen time, or lesser allowing women to have their own device as compared to giving a device to a male, and it becomes more challenging and more restrictive. But at the same time, we have also seen the same element really evolving and changing since COVID, when remote jobs and work from home became a norm the way it was not before. And we have seen how this, just after COVID, the women participation in digital economy has increased because of remote job being a norm. And, as we say, when we talk about social barriers, and I have to take a moment to really address all the women viewers for this session, is that it's very ironic to me always that we talk about social barriers, but if we really pay attention, um, at the center of each society is a woman. So all the stereotypes, all the gossips, all the biases that we see are actually coming out of our own homes, and we we as mothers, sisters, um, you know daughters, we are allowing all those biases to groom in our own homes, and then they become part of our society that we live in. So as long as that we start making sure that the environment that we are providing to other women in our own homes is away and free from these biases, these actually get addressed. And moving on to the next steps and way forward, um, I'll just briefly, if I have to say, it has to be in three stages. First, data. We need more data on problem as well as on the solutions. At Pasha, we have done basic data. We have published two reports, one on diversity and inclusion benchmarking analysis, and the recent one, diversity and inclusion landscape report. And both have tried to capture data which has not been captured before to understand the problem more, but we still need more data to take more measures. The second is in terms of policies, both at HR level as well at the regulatory level. So at the regulatory level, our labor laws, a lot of our labor laws were written back in 1970s in the industrial age, which do not work for knowledge economy. So those labor laws, and specifically in terms of diversity and inclusivity element, a lot of these regulations needs to be written, which we have already talked about in the report that we published on DNI. And second, on the HR policies level, we have seen that all those companies which offer maternity leave is actually not a HR policy; it's a mandatory requirement. But daycare, which companies which have a transport alliance, it actually improves. And those companies which allow hybrid work or a remote work opportunity for women actually improves and their retention and engagement for their employees. And lastly, so first was data, second policies, and lastly, we need more and more case studies and role models to come out if we want to see a better future in Pakistan.
Really appreciate the very detailed response, Hira, and thank you for bringing up the sort of categorization of issues, with access being one of the most pertinent issues that at the back end affects how women participate in the labor force, especially for value chains that are digitizing as we go ahead. I know you mentioned the three areas where you feel we need to have more interventions and where we need to do more work and more effort in ensuring that future of women in terms of work is more secure. I also want the panel, I would love to hear from the rest of the panel about the strategies that they feel we can all adopt with a wide range of stakeholders, can adopt to address some of the issues that were mentioned in this discussion today, and then some of the issues that are more at the back end but manifest themselves into the decisions that women take. I would, however, in the interest of time, and I know the panel has been kind enough to give us a lot of their time, could I please request everyone to keep their answers to 1 minute? And could I also request everyone to choose that one specific topic that is at the top of the mountain that they feel like needs to 100% be focused? I say this knowing very well that, as Dr. Majid pointed out earlier, the universe of what we can do is vast, it's expansive, and I want us to come out with at least top 5 or 4 picks from the session that we 100% need to work on and that we all can rally behind. So if I could ask you to keep your answers for future strategies to please 1 minute, and at the end of it, please identify that one specific action item that you would want us to focus on. Dr. Hadia, starting with you.
Great. So Heba, I'm going to say we need to think about designs. And so this has come up really emphatically in our work at Gentech. It's something that I think a lot of, across many disciplines, a lot of interventionists are now focusing on. We need designs for women to be done by women. And it's been so fantastic listening to Hira, listening to Faisal, listening to Zofine, because when we talk to women in the field, what we very quickly realize is that a lot of the tech solutions that we try and come up with, a lot of the interventions that we're trying to design, actually take technologies that were designed for very different contexts and we try and apply them to the local context. So हम जो सोल्यूशन एम्प्लॉय करने की सोल्यूशन डिप्लॉय करने की कोशिश करते हैं वो हमारी कॉन्टेक्स्ट के लिए डिजाइन ही नहीं हुआ होता. So it's really important for us to, as Hira was saying, get more data, really understand the problem. I mean, I'll give you an example. We know that women can't, it's really hard for women to get access to SIMs. So we really need to think about it from the policy perspective and try and figure out how do we get women access to mobile internet without requiring those really strict, without having those really strict requirements when it comes to CNIC, women being there, putting the fingerprint. हमें पता है mobility उनके लिए बहुत मुश्किल है. So let's think about designs a little bit more. Let's design keeping the constraints of women in mind. And I think that will open up a lot more possibilities for us.
Designing for women and hopefully by women is definitely the way forward. And I think we're all ready to sort of forward that agenda. Zofine, could we also hear your thoughts about what is that topic for you and what are the strategies overall? Sorry, Zofine, we can't hear you. Could you please unmute yourself?
Sorry. So I'll be very quick, and this comes from a journalist. The geek gap. I think that the inability to articulate tech concepts to non-scientific audiences is very critical in thwarting employability. For people for women especially. This is because I'm a woman and I'm talking to women. So women in the tech should think about how to combat this. The other thing, which is probably a more generalized thing, I would say, is that the confidence gap, or the not having the confidence that we need to, get this imposter syndrome out, and for that we need more women again to help the women who do not have this confidence, to combat that. So I think women need this needs sisterhood. Thank you.
I really love the term that you just coined, which is geek gap, and that coupled with sisterhood for technology sounds like the ultimate solution that we need to make sure that digitalization does indeed empower women. Faisa, if we could also hear from you on the same topic.
Yeah, I think for Pakistan right now, the most important thing we need to do is to have strong infrastructure in place. So investment in infrastructure. A lot of our country is still without power. A lot of our country is still without good internet access. Internet is expensive, as well as access to smartphones and computers. Women usually do not have a lot of disposable income, and when you make smartphones and computers so expensive, they cannot afford it. So we need to maybe have services where they can get micro loans to do that. Maybe they can lease that equipment also, because currently I do not know about any service where you can lease like equipment for learning or improving your skill set. So investment in infrastructure and access to cheap tech services and products is, I think, the number one thing that I can think of right now.
No, definitely. Infrastructure and access lie at the core, at the foundation of a digitizing society, and without that, we'll be nowhere. Before we close the session, Hira, could we ask you to take one pick out of the three that you decided, a very quick selection?
Tough question. I think if I have to take one pick, it would be data. I'm a big believer that you need to know the problem in order to take solutions, and the lack of data, which is actually hindering us to take in solution. And just on a last note, I was reading this Forbes study. When we talk about future of work is balanced. We need to promote work-life balance. Future of work is remote. We need to promote remote jobs or hybrid working hours. Future of work is also flexible, and future of work is digital. So as long as we are fulfilling all these criteria, we are embracing future of work.
I think that summarizes a lot of what has been said in spirit and in theory, and with practical examples today in the conversation. With some of our topics being design, ensuring that design is inclusive, design for solutions are by women and for women, and takes into consideration the context within which these digital solutions come. The idea of having more role models and bridging that geek gap will be critical for enabling women to sort of take over the tech space and to make sure that they're actually making a name for themselves. Having infrastructure that enables and allowing women to access digital technologies in a more empowering way will definitely lead the future. And last but not the least, as Hira said, you really can't get to the solution of the problem until and unless you correctly identify what the problem is. With those 4 things coming our way from this amazing panel discussion, I would just like to thank all of our panelists for being kind enough to give us their time and their insights on the topic. And we hope that we can work together to make the future of Pakistan and the future of work in Pakistan for women a lot more inclusive and a lot more equitable. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in for Tabadlab's 54th Policy Roundtable.
Thank you.